Okay, good luck.
Thanks.
Right. This talk will draw on the topic that we touched today, also money. So let's roll. Open source software is the backbone of the internet and of the IT industry. And it's a bit like the oxygen. It's invisible, yet essential. And similarly to the oxygen, it's oftentimes simply not remembered about, and at best, just taken for granted. And this presentation will be about the problems the open source has, how these problems affect literally every one of us, and how these problems can be fixed. My name is Tomasz Donarski. I'm a Ruby developer, and as you might have guessed, an open source enthusiast. Currently helping Upside with developing Spree Commerce. Rafał did an introduction of what Spree is, so I won't be covering this one. As for the organizational stuff, this presentation will comprise of two parts. The first one, when I will list in detail and explore these problems, and how they contribute to the whole and build up the quite nasty situation we have. And then I will explore and discuss a particular tool that aims at addressing these problems. So without further ado, I would like to begin with a tale, a fictionary tale. Say there is a developer working at a startup company. You can imagine a high-rise building, Pizza Fridays, and all the usual stuff we associate with working in a startup company. He does a typical developer stuff. But however, there is one recurring theme in his work, something that annoys him very much and in fact has been bugging him for months now. He hates it. It hints on some missing tooling, on some workflow process not being automated yet, even though we have a 21st century. So it essentially forces him to perform some tasks manually. We are all programmers. We hate that. Despite the manual labor, but he's forced to do so. So as any developer having to put up with this, once he's done with this tedious work, what he does, he sets out to a pub with his friends. When complains about it, how annoying it is, how it simply should not be so because, well, it's just wasted time and effort. And for all these hours of complaint, his friends just nod in agreement. And one of them, being a very supportive person, says that, would you just quit bitching about and do something about it? Because if it were not for all these cries, you would have at least have laid the plan, or the thing will be basically half done. The hero of the story is shocked to hear this, but needs to agree that, well, that there is a point to it. So once they're finished drinking, he gets home, gets some sleep, and since the following morning, over the course of a couple of weeks, he comes up with a piece of software that alleviates the pain. He brings it to work, and, well, it clicks. Does the magic, and work is all fun again. Brilliant. But soon he comes to the realization that, hey, maybe he was not the only one that was in need of putting up with this tedious manual process. So he publishes this thing as an open source library. And initially, nothing happens. But after a couple of weeks, things start to get traction. There are more and more users of this library flowing in every day. He's excited about that what he came up with provided some improved developer experience, that it helped actually anyone apart from himself. He likes it very much. Fast forward a couple of months, the user base grows exponentially. the demand for new features is higher and higher. The housekeeping of the package takes more and more time. And in fact, he's excited about it, all these new users, these resolve the bugs and all the help that he's able to deliver to these people, that he commits to it and maintains it in his free time. Now, in fact, after all these months, he works 2 shifts. One at the startup company that he is employed for, and the second shift maintaining the open source project. But he is inspired by this once again and prefers to improve the developer experience for the people all over the world instead of just doing the daytime stuff he does for the startup company. So without much thinking, he quits the job and immerses himself in the open source project of his only. Well, as you might have guessed, he, in a couple of weeks, runs out of money. Well, he realizes that he needs to look for a job in order to sustain himself. So he partially abandons this project, decreases his presence in it in order to, well, sustain himself and look for a job. He finds a job, but being a very mission-driven person and preferring working in the open source over working for yet another startup, he saves up a bit, ditches the job, and immerses himself back again into the ever-growing pile of issues, feature requests, and stuff. Once again, as you might have guessed, the happiness does not last for long as he runs out of money again. But this time, he is a little bit smarter and looks out for sponsorship options. He checks out GitHub sponsorship, Patreon, Ko-Fi, and stuff, but sadly, to no avail. Now, once again, after all these months, his project being immensely popular to the extent that every developer has heard about it and most likely is using this library, he gets as much as, I don't know, a couple of $100 which for him living in a Bay Area is not sustainable at all. So he once again starts looking for a job. And this story goes over and over again. The vicious cycle repeats for years. And there it is. And would like to ask you, how do you feel about such people that put their own financial stability, their own security on the line in order to provide you with some value that you use? I myself feel both compassionate that he needed to do that, and I'm grateful for his decisions, for decisions of such a person. And now, I lied about the part that this story is made up and it's fictional. It is not. And this is the person it was about. Does anyone recognize the guy? I would actually be surprised if anyone is, but any guesses as for what the package was the story about? What library? Anyone? This is basically story of Homebrew. And on the other hand, you might be familiar with this picture, a famous XKCD's dependency comic, also dubbed as the Nebraska problem. It illustrates the story quite succinctly, at least to some extent, because Max has eventually left Homebrew and, well, the internet runs, the pyramid did not collapse, and that was because the Homebrew, in fact, was designed to be viral and that its maintenance and contribution is easy to start with. So, in fact, Homebrew is the open source project with the biggest number of contributors across all open source software. So now there is there is more bricks than it is depicted now, but at least for some period of time, especially since the inception, Max was the only brick holding it all together. But this is only one dependency, one library. And regrettably, most of our dependencies are not that renowned and do not have that many contributors. And one of those certainly is log4j. You might have heard about this little Java logging library, as it came to the spotlight some time ago. As it turned out, it contains severe security vulnerability. The bad part was, well, it was widely adopted. There were many commercial software, enterprise software, and even critical governmental systems using it. And nobody knew that they're depending on unpaid work of a couple of random guys. Well, I don't know if from Nebraska, but nobody knew that. And it got dubbed as the single biggest, most critical vulnerability of the last decade. It was big and all over the news. But the worst part about the whole case of log4j was that it demonstrated very well how little understanding in the industry is there as to what open source is and how does it work. Because when the shit hit the fan, it was the maintainers, a couple of dudes from Nebraska, that came under fire, scrutiny, and took all the vicious bidding, both from multi-million-dollar companies and individuals as well. So while being beaten up, they just issued a humble plea for fairness and started to work on a patch, which they, of course, provided, and, well, show's over. Everybody went home, and the case got forgotten. And as it turned out, that it was not only these maintainers that were abused and harassed, it was also other unrelated projects that, well, received these kind of things. And one of them were the guys from curl, which have been receiving emails and requests that they should respond to, and in fact, within some very short time frame, I think it was 24 hours, that they should undertake and they should respond with within 24 hours, they should respond with a list of steps that are willing to undertake in order to mitigate the risk. And the funny thing was that this request, to put it mildly, came from a company that is and most likely was and is in top 500, a company that employs 40,000 people worldwide. And they demanded that their dependency will provide such a thing. And, well, just to make sure, there were no service level agreements with, as for that, no SLAs, nobody was on any duty. They basically had no obligation to do anything whatsoever. They could laugh as their empires are collapsing. So they just, well aware of that. So you can grow pretty big and don't know that for the most part, the 90% of your stack is open source, and it's maintained by volunteers that when the as said, shit hits the fan, you're left alone, and it is just up to their benevolent attitude that the thing is gonna get fixed. So that's about the lack of understanding as to what open source is and how it works. Now to the part about the lack of supporting the dependencies. Core.js is being downloaded 30 million times a week. So needless to say, it is quite an important piece of Node.js world. And even though it is so widely adopted, it is barely funded. And what is even more depressing is that the README of this project contains a detailed and elaborate explanation with reasoning as to why they think they should receive anything if they're being present in, well, 99% of websites or apps. So even though they kindly provided such a plea, they received hardly anything. Well, certainly not money. What they actually received is abuse and harassment. So this is not nice. But that would be for the Java and JavaScript things. This is a Ruby conference. Let's get to something closer to our hearts. Will it work? Okay. There are also packages that we often depend on. We use them every day, yet they're not supported either. These are excerpts from Peter Solnica's GitHub sponsorship page. I haven't seen him. Most likely he cannot join this conference as he's busy maintaining some open source. But Peter points out that open source is basically unsustainable. And it boils down to this very simple fact that the less support an open source maintainer receives, the less work they're able to deliver, right? Which, as similarly to the story of Homebrew, effectively puts us on hold. We are, as dependents, if we use such libraries, we are their de facto customers. So if they need to perform some other duties first, like the day job of the Homebrew guy, and only then, once they're finished with it, they can focus on the open source, they provide us value. As any customer, it should be, well, infuriating for us that we are being put on hold for days, if not weeks. And adding on top of that all the fatigue, context switching, and also, sadly, burnout, this is suboptimal to say the least. So oftentimes, sponsorship pages of open source packages look like this. This one is of Peter. It is depressing to say the least. But don't get me wrong, it is not my intention to play the blame game. It is neither any one of you to blame, nor I'm trying to say that Peter's goal was too ambitious. No, it was not. The root cause of the problem is that the system of supporting the open source is imperfect. And to be more precise, there is no system whatsoever. There is no automation. There is no system. I'll get back to it in a minute. But firstly, I would like to list two more, so to speak, pollutants of the OSS landscape. With the first one being sabotaging of packages. Every now and then we learn the hard way, sadly, what does it mean to depend on something? And it's been demonstrated numerous times by, well, packages being sabotaged. One of the quite loud cases was LeftBut. And the story goes, once again, there was a developer that maintained a couple of open source projects. LeftBut, obviously, was one of them, but it was due to some other of his projects that all the hell broke loose. He got into some legal quarrel with some company over the naming of one of his libraries. Also some intellectual property stuff got involved, but the bad part was that the NPM judged in favor of the company, and NPM hijacked his library. So they revoked his access rights and granted it to the company. And he, in an act of revenge, yanked all his open source code. And by yanked, I mean he deleted his open source project from the registry and LeftBut being the most widely adopted, caused, as it turned out, many broken CI pipelines all over the world. And disclaimer, I don't mean that defending yourself and fighting for your rights is bad. No. This particular case demonstrated that in an act of revenge or making us aware, which he did, he contributed to much of collateral damage done to innocent bystanders. And, well, the company that he tried to punish most likely haven't even heard about and weren't heard, in fact, in any way. So the case got audible, company got unpunished, and we were left with broken builds. So this is one mode of, well, a risk of dependency. And the second case was of Colors.js and Faker.js libraries. And here, the maintainer of those got, to put it mildly, upset with a continuous lack of support from unicorn companies and all those smaller entities as well. So he made these two packages malfunction in so that these either produced or contained gibberish code, which, as far as I remember, also contributed to broken CI pipelines. And once again, standing your own ground is totally fine. I support it with my whole heart, but breaking everyone's toys, well, it is less than ideal. It could be done in a more civilized way, but I'm not blaming the developer either. The second of the aforementioned pollutants is malware, worth its own presentation, if not conference. So I will just list two examples here. Event stream. This one involved a bit of social engineering in such a way that a developer trying to gain trust of the maintainer. Maybe, in fact, they even provide them with a couple of valuable pull requests, maybe close some issues, whatever. It was all just done to gain the trust. And once they gained it, the attackers or the attacker planted a backdoor, which, long story short, caused the unsuspecting users to lose bitcoins. Well, sensitive topic. People don't like using money even if it's crypto stuff. So that's one. And the second, as you might guess, what this is about, the maintainers of the malicious package would hope that you mistype the dependency name into your gem file, run bundle install, and any guesses what could happen or what happened in that case? Well, in this case, the environmental variables were leaked to the attacker's server. Well, not nice. So one more remark regarding the nasty maliciousness in the open source. It is estimated by GitHub that 17% of all bugs, 17% of all bugs in the open source is planted there deliberately in order to exploit something. And the worst part is that it's hugely unaddressed. We're not supporting it in any way, or anyhow, in an adequate way, that there are no incentives to hunt these bugs down and discover them before either material or data damage is done. So getting back to the promised part about the no system. Sometime earlier this year, Nate Berkepek, the Puma maintainer, said this during RubyConf EU, that his proposed way to resolve the problem of heroes, he means open source contributors, not being paid adequately, well, is to start paying them. It is up to us. As it was said, we are their customers. So if we value their work, if we use their, well, kind of sort of product, then it is up to us to support them. And he is only theoretically right. Because for pragmatical reasons, I beg to differ that the good thing that he used donations. here. I beg to differ that the donations are the way to go, because the current prevailing the current modes are imperfect. There are two of them. It is sponsorship and bounties. Sponsorship lets you to choose a package of preference and remunerate it. Typically, only the most prominent, well-renowned packages receive that. Rails, most likely, well, if they were not well off on their own. But anyhow, they're big. They would receive it. Puma, most likely. I don't know, Sidekick, they have the enterprise, so they're as well on their own. But most of us know it, so there is a high chance that these highly popular and well-known packages will receive. But we've seen the progress bar of Pete Stolnitsa's from Driver B stable. Well, not much of support, even though it is included in the gem files. And those leaf nodes like core.js and log4j wouldn't receive any sponsorship whatsoever. So it is either the visible things on top or something that comes to the spotlight because it has been exploited. But as log4j case demonstrates, once the patch was in place, everybody went home and forgotten about them. So as for the sponsorship, as far as sponsorship goes, even if there would be hypothetically a unicorn company, say Shopify, that would like to help every single one of their dependencies. A ballpark estimate, they may have thousands across the whole dependency graph, 1,000 of dependencies. There is no automated way. It's not easy to support every single dependency they have. So if a thing is not easy to perform, it won't be done. They will just don't bother. So usually such companies throw some couple of $1 million a year into a random open source project being, I don't know, whatever, but it's only the one receiving it, so it's just a token of doing something. And the rest is being forgotten. Bounties, on the other hand, oftentimes assume a form of pay-by-feature requests, which is totally fine, as it's desirable by at least one or two customers. But the key thing is that even though it is desired by a customer or two, it might not be in the best interest of a library in general. So at best, it just temporarily distracts the maintainers from their core duties in order to just sustain themselves and earn some money. But there is a all too high risk that the efforts will just drift towards the needs of a very particular customer. So an abstract thing like a library slowly becomes a product and is passively hijacked by a customer that was issuing the highest number of bounties. So this is less than ideal. As for the short summary, we have developers, contributors, and maintainers that are distracted by the need of having daytime jobs. Once again, a case of Homebrew, Pete Stolnitsa's, as we've seen from the progress bar, and adding fatigue, burnout, and context switching on top of it, well, less than ideal. We could do better. Lack of the awareness, as it's been demonstrated by curl and log4j, crazy expectations. Companies should know better, that they maintain, that they depend on unpaid work and made squillions of dollars out of unpaid work and having the approximately say 90% of their stack being open source, and they give nothing in return. The security risks, sabotage and malware, just because either there is an accident, somebody deletes a package, or just acts in revenge, or NPM does some crazy stuff. And the, well, current modes of support that simply don't work. So you could say that it is how it is. Nobody said that's gonna be easy, that it's just a tough business. And, well, you'd be right. But there is a glimmer of hope, though. There is a person that is working on a solution, and the good part, the best part, is that you know this person already. This is him, the homebrew guy. He's brewing something. He comes up with tea. Tea is a system for rewarding open source developers based on their contributions. And in fact, not only the OSS developers, but all participants of a, as was said, system. But before we get to these multiple other participants of the network also being rewarded, let's break it down to parts. It has a couple of components. Perhaps unsurprisingly, it comprises a new package manager, a successor to Homebrew, which is an essential piece of the system as it provides it with an information about the dependency structure of each library. You can imagine what you're seeing regularly in gem files, in your gem files, in your projects. And so this information is goes to the system. The centralized package registry in order to guard ourselves from the hijacking, sabotage, and stuff. A reputation system, and a rewards engine. And the rewards engine that distributes value based on an algorithm that determines each entry's contribution to the utility of the whole open source. It essentially evaluates each single library and assigns it a score. And this score that has been assigned corresponds to how impactful against whole open source a given library is. Perhaps the most groundbreaking thing is that with T, every dependency across the whole graph will be rewarded. So it'll be the ones on top, dryer B gems as well, and the leaf nodes as log4j, score.js's, leftbuts, and stuff. The small ones won't be ignored anymore. So this is a new thing. That's the automation that has not been present yet. And the rewards are gonna get distributed recursively from the top ones, once again, the sidekick or whatever sidekick depends on, and it will split down to the smaller ones as well. And the rewards are gonna get distributed as a tokens in a proof of stake, blockchain. And for that matter, I would like to clarify two terms. Staking, this is a standard part in every proof of stake blockchain. It is an action of locking tokens in order to support the stability of the network. So by design, it is a must. And steeping, on the other hand, is a thing particular to T, which is an action of locking tokens in order to support a certain claim and receive rewards based on validity of that claim. And this is a primary mode that's going to be used for supporting the open source developers' contribution. Few slides back, I've mentioned that it is not only the contributors that are going to receive rewards, that it's also other participants as well. What I've meant is that T is about incentives. It is about fixing the current incentives. When you're doing something good for the open source ecosystem, in T, this is going to be recognized, and you are to receive a reward for the good deed that you've just performed. So the support is extended across all participants of the network, not only the contributors, not only the open source maintainers. And so contribution does not necessarily mean code. It can be other things as well. Of course, some, if not majority, might contribute code. Others might validate the contributed code, and others might just provide economical value to either the developers or to support the system. So here goes the list of these participants. The most important ones, of course, package maintainers, the pillars of the open source which deserve to be empowered and rewarded, regular, everyday, normal developers, people like us that take the open source projects and craft other products, not necessarily open sourced, supporters that value the work of open source developers and would like to help them. So these are the ones that will be steeping the tokens. Quite an interesting role, T-tasters. There is an asterisk in there as there is a word pun or a word play on T-tasting and testing software. And as new packages are getting released or new versions of existing packages are getting released, it is good, it is worth to have this work validated as well. You can think of it as a third-party code review, which in T would be important as we can consider the case if you're a maintainer and you're coming up with a new release, say Spree 4.7. Your claim is that I've prepared this new release, and my claim is that it's free of bugs, of CVEs, and you can use it safely. And I support my claim with this much of T tokens. T tasters, on the other hand, validate this claim if the maintainer indeed did everything good, and if they did, then they're entitled to receive the reward. But if not, and there is something not okay, then, me as a taster, I discovered a bug that otherwise would be undetected, and I helped the community to discover some nasty CVE before it was too late. So this role is mainly responsible for addressing the currently unaddressed need of, or need the 17% of bugs just lingering out there, being undetected. And now for the meaty part, how could the contribution look like? Firstly, the aforementioned steeping, so the primary mode of supporting the open source developers. By steeping tokens, I essentially say that I value this library, I support it, I use it, and would like to help it. So say I take 100 tokens. A fraction of it stays with me and generates reward for myself that I was willing to get into the sponsorship, that I even started sponsoring or helping a package. So this is a new mode, new incentive that helps people to start supporting. So a fraction, once again, of this 100 stays with me and generates my interest. The rest goes to the package, where it gets divided once again. A part of it stays with the package, so say with Spree, and the remaining part is being split across its dependencies. So this is what gives us the coverage of the whole dependency graph. I myself have chosen only one package that I trust, use, and would like to support, and its dependencies, whatever they are, they're being automatically covered and remunerated as well. So this is better than what we have now. Staking tokens, in order to support the stability of the network. So this is for ones that don't even need to know that there are packages like it, but just support the idea. And this is going to work basically as you would have money in your savings account. This generates you some interest and gives you a reward for helping the system stability. And the package submission. So the code contribution. In order to submit a new package release, 3 things would need to happen atomically. The release would need to be registered. It would need to be uploaded to decentralized storage, and the trustworthiness would need to be backed up by steeping some tokens. One, it's going to be, all these things will be provided, then the person that submitted the release would receive a token which will act as a key for directing the rewards to them, and will be the proof that it is them that provided the new package release. The third way would be reviewing it. Once again, the certain maintainer comes with a claim that we can use it. They support it with their tokens, and the tasters validate that claim if it's indeed so that they're not providing us with yet another, I don't know, event stream or that typo squatted thing that leaks our environmental variables. And in case of a review, in case of a positive review, then everybody receives a reward and it's nice. If a review, however, is negative, then in the mode of responsible disclosure, they contact the maintainer so that they can address the issue in a timely manner. It has been wonderfully demonstrated last year during last year's edition of this conference, when Rafał Rottenberger informed us about a bug in device. When he discovered it some months earlier, he firstly contacted the maintainers, notified them about it, and as the thing did not get patched until his talk, he informed us in a stage. So in T, it will work in a similar way. If the maintainer that got entrusted with by the community addresses the issue in a timely fashion, then it's all okay. And if not, well, the sum of their tokens gonna get slashed. So now let's summarize how it's gonna look like in a broader sense. Am I saying that there is a pile of nasty problems and a new shiny package manager blockchain power that's gonna fix it all? Well, there is more to it than just a new package manager and blockchain. It is, the whole T movement is, once again, about fixing the underlying incentives that we have. It is willing to stimulate the growth, to help people to get onboarded to the open source, and and start participating in open source. And the best part is that it is a very thin extra layer that will be just that will come on top of what we have. It doesn't fundamentally change what the open source is, how open source software is being crafted or utilized. It is just nice extra things that come on top without much of extra cost. Certainly, it won't be perfect since the day one, but Rome wasn't built in a day. Now, a small disclaimer, I'm not associated with T in any way. I just like the idea, think that their goal is, well, ambitious but very noble, that they thought this through quite well. And also, this is work in progress. So even though I did my best in order for the things to be as accurate and detailed as possible, it is all subjective to change. Well, in fact, I've learned yesterday that the NFT part is gonna be significantly changed in order to support multi contributor. So that a certain library can be maintained by multiple people and all of them will get rewarded. So once again, work in progress, it is changing. There is a new white paper. As for the white papers, if anyone is interested, I highly recommend reading their white paper, the currently available one, which discusses the things in much greater detail that I was able to provide you with in this presentation. Well, in 2 or 3 weeks, there will be a revised version of it. If you're, though, a fan of some other modes of learning, like podcasts, there is an episode of Stack Overflow podcast from last year where the homebrew guy, Max Howell, discusses it with the hosts, where he discusses the design and ambition of T in detail. That's how I learned about them and highly recommend. And also, as we're drawing near to the end of this presentation, I would like to actually dedicate it to a particular open source developer and Ruby committer that, in fact, was here at this stage, if I remember correctly, in 2019, and currently is not able to attend this conference as he fights for Ukraine's freedom. Viktor Shepelev. I would just love for this presentation to be my honor to all his contributions. So that will be the end. If you'd like to find out more about T, you can do so under these links. If you'd like to connect, you can find me under these links. Thank you for your attention. Any questions?
Any question?
All clear. Okay.
Maybe not question, but one thing to mention. In next month is going to start Hacktoberfest. I think it's 11th edition. So if someone wants to start contribution to open source, it's really a good moment to start.
Contributions are welcome, certainly.
I just read that some article about also donation for I don't know the sidekick maintainer. So also he described how to monetize this open source and so on. So it's also good to read. This is also some, of course, different than T project. And I also read some article that they gathered some donations of 9 millions to provide this system. So there is interest in that actually from from the, let's say, business?
Yes, I think that T received some grant. I think they got a couple of millions, as building these types of stuff is costly, but they're well. From what I can tell, I've been following the developments of T for a couple of months now. They seem to have it well through and consider many corner cases. So anyone that has an idea or any form of feedback, also critique, it is highly encouraged by them to provide them with. They have a Discord. I think it is. There certainly can be figured out from the page. They will be grateful for receiving any feedback, so you're welcome. So it is welcome, sorry. Anyone else?
I would just add maybe a small comment.
Sure.
Sorry. Because I think there is alternative, and it's vastly rejected by programmers, and to learn sales and marketing and just start selling software.
Yes,
I think we are rejecting this as a profession in general. I think.
You even mentioned Sidekick as an example.
Yeah, Sidekick is a good example.
They also had a problem with money at the beginning, so they started Sidekick Pro and then Sidekick Enterprise.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this will certainly not do any harm. It will help everyone if we would, as developers, learn salesmanship. But on the other hand, people are different, and as it has been demonstrated by Peter Solnice's case, then, well, he would prefer to just focus on open source. And most likely, it is the most cost-effective way to come up with a thing that, as Sidekick did, or Puma. Nate runs a Rails consultancies agency, and then he contributes to Puma. So it might be that it is a bit too gone for that task. Maybe we don't need to roll out a blockchain, but I'm curious how it will play out. We'll see.
Okay. One question. Apologies if you already mentioned that in your talk, but I was checking this whole thing on my phone when you were talking. And my question is, because you mentioned blockchain, their website mentions Web3. At some point, they were mentioning NFT. So all the stuff that I would love to avoid as much as possible in my life forever. So my question is, because you kept saying about T tokens and nothing about the actual money. So how does the monetization scheme works here?
Yes.
Other than holding a worthless bag of tokens?
Yep. Wonderful question. I receive. I'm waiting for the reply for them. Actually, it was voiced in the white paper that at least partially it will be up to the community to provide the use cases for it. Certainly, they replied me 2 days ago that it will come similarly to Ethereum now in finite supply. So they won't be just printing it infinitely. And if it's gonna get tradable, it will be up to community. So it can all be considered a research still. For sure, all things crypto receive duly scorn and skepticism, but they're well aware of that. So actually, in the worst case, we'll just receive, as I think of it, after months of following and digging up facts about it, we will receive a metric, that thing that answers the question how valuable a given piece of software is for the whole landscape. And initially, it might be based only on the download count. Then there is a question of which likely would come up in subsequent releases. or refinements of the algorithm that we will distinguish between runtime and build time dependencies, and also actual usage could be factored into the algorithm. Well, Amazon bills us based on how often a certain piece of code is being executed. So things like this are already can already be seen in the world. So certainly, I would expect this to be a part if it goes that far. That is.
Yeah, because from what I understand, you have to actually be vendor locked in into their package manager to be part of that. So you have to actually use it in your project. Because the T is going to be mostly a package manager, and like right now when I check their website currently, they're just mentioning the tokens in like small print, and all of it is about that it's a new amazing package manager that will replace Homebrew and it will be super fast and amazing.
Yes, the most part that is done and live, I think, is the package manager part. Package manager part. They put it live some time ago. It demonstrates some speed benefits over Homebrew, but as for the T's design, it is just a part. So the rest is not yet published. I'm waiting for the second revision of the white paper. I might follow up on some local Ruby groups meetings with some updates if anyone would be interested. Yeah, certainly.
Okay, let's cut it here. Thank you very much.
Thanks.